Fog out there right now. Can't barely see across the street. And as the weather's going to warm up, we've got a special weather statement with lots of rain and wind on the way. But again, that's better than snow. I'll take that any day of the week. I'd like to thank Vanessa Van Den Ness on the other side of the glass at the control boards, doing a fine job as always. Liberal Party members can begin casting advance ballots today to choose their next leader less than 2 weeks from now. Mark Carney, Chrystia Freeland, Karina Gould, and Frank Baylis made their pitches to Liberal voters in 2 debates this week. They debated the carbon tax as well as Donald Trump's tariff threats on Canadian goods last night, and I watched the debate, and I could only stand it for about 45 minutes. And then I was done. I said, I don't need to see any more of this. I found very, very boring. I know I should have watched the whole thing, but look, I just found it dull, to be honest with you. And I don't want to say disappointed because I don't have a favorite or a horse in the game or a horse in the race or any of that or vested interest other than just straight up interest. But Mark Carney, to me, was pretty disappointing for a guy who is supposedly dynamic and has achieved what he has and had the jobs that he has had. He just looked just out of his element, I guess. I don't know. To be quite honest with you, the only one that really impressed me at all was Frank Baylis. I didn't and don't know much about Baylis, but I thought he presented himself well. I thought he let people know about his private sector background and the reasons why he would be effective at brokering deals and dealing with Trump. The fact that he has been an MP, but it's been 6 or so years since Trudeau, so he's quite disconnected from this government. And I think if I had to vote today, I would probably support Frank Baylis. That would be the guy that I would support right now based on what I saw last night. Mark Carney, it just didn't. I don't know why, but the name Michael Ignatieff kept kind of flashing in my mind as I watched Mark Carney last night. You know, the Liberals desperately want him to be that guy that can lead them back to the promised land, and maybe he can, and according to some polling, it looks like that could be the case, but I don't know. It just didn't impress me. Chrystia Freeland, was way too much baggage there. I don't think there's anything that she could do or say that would interest me because of, again, she kept saying what she will do. And the counter to that, of course, is why didn't you do it? You had 10 years. You were there you were there with Justin Trudeau all along in the highest positions of government, including the deputy prime minister. And I just way too much baggage. Karina Gould as well, just way too much Liberal baggage there. Frank Baylis, to me, if the Liberals were smart, well, I shouldn't say this because he probably wouldn't get elected if he were the leader. So, but I like Baylis. That's my take. I will ask your take on this. What did you think? Did you watch it? Do you have a favorite? Who impressed you? Do you think that Mark Carney can get it done? Also, polling. And then look, polls are a snapshot in time, and you hear the old saying, the only poll that matters is election day, and that's true. But people pay attention to polls, whether you like it or not. And if Mark Carney is chosen leader of the Liberals, more Canadians would vote for his party than Pierre Poilievre's Conservatives. That's according to a new Leger marketing poll. And that's hard to believe considering where we were not all that long ago. The poll says Carney as leader, the Liberal support would rise to 40%, while the Conservatives would be at 38%. Also another poll saying the same thing, Ipsos. For the first time since 2021, Ipsos polling now shows the Federal Liberal Party with a slight lead over the Conservatives. So these are two polls saying basically the same thing. So do you think these polls are accurate? If so, why have the Liberals surged? Can they sustain it? And is the Trump factor really the number one key role in all of this? These are other things that she can talk about. And I have other things as well in the pile, as I always say, that we can get to. And we'll open the phone lines today between noon and 1. Dr. John Gillis will be by for house calls between 11 and 12. We'll take your health-related questions and calls as always. Also, I should say this. We'll talk accountability and this progressive conservative government. Nova Scotia's Freedom of Information Commissioner is calling on the provincial government to withdraw legislation she says weakens the public's right to access government records and documents. Of course, there was the about face on the AG legislation this week. The progressive conservatives are no longer being scrummed when at the legislature. They're going across the street to a media room, media availability. And this has got some people's attention, and some people feel that it's another example of a government that does not want to be accountable and lacks transparency. So I'll ask you that question as well. And again, whatever else you wanted to get into when we open the phone lines between noon and 1. Thanks so much for tuning in and listening, and thanks to Vanessa Van Den Ness, of course, as always, on the other side of the glass. The control board's doing a fine job, as always. Now joining me for a chat, Keanin Loomis, President and CEO of the Canadian Institute of Steel Construction. Keanin, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate it.
Good morning, Todd, and good morning, Halifax. How you doing?
We're doing well. I saw this story on the CBC website. I thought it was quite interesting. The threat of a tariff war is already driving up housing costs. Industry experts say if threats continue, builders will stop projects until costs become more certain. And at the I-beam is something that is very costly and very integral when it comes to this type of construction. And a lot of it comes from the United States. I was not aware of that. So tell us more about how this might complicate things even more.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity, Todd, and you're absolutely right. So I'm fairly new to this industry. I came from the Chamber of Commerce world and took over in June of 2024. And one of the things that, I learned a lot, certainly over the last number of months, but one of the things that really, really surprised me was to know that we don't make our own I-beams in this country. So what's referred to as wide flange in the industry is something that we have to import. And we do most of that from the United States. As you said, it is the skeletal weight-bearing component to any hospital or school or arena or multi-residential, multi-story apartment building. And so the price of that has gone up by 25%. That number is not just out of thin air. And so, it is obviously going to cause a lot of issues and disruptions to projects going forward, whether they be residential or infrastructure projects. For us as a country, and the word you used was uncertainty, and that's exactly what is going on right now in the industry. And so both in the United States and in Canada, the price of all projects and most products, because steel is in almost everything, has gone up at a time when consumers, of course, are clamoring for prices to come down.
All right, so counter tariffs would be the big issue here, correct?
Yeah, counter tariffs would definitely be the biggest issue here. So the steel that we make, I'm calling you from my hometown in Hamilton. The steel we make here in Hamilton from DeFasco and Stelco, a lot of that goes down to the U.S., but it's not in residential. It's more in the automobile industry. We, on the other hand, because they've found their niche within the North American supply chain and done very, very well in doing that, and that's what free trade will do over a number of decades. But as a result, we import, other products and are overly reliant on the U.S. market for particular products, including especially the I-beam. And so, in fact, the issue is that we have a fairly good and balanced trade between our two countries because of this. And so these disruptions are, they're just so unnecessary, so unfortunate, and obviously we're more vulnerable than the U.S. is.
Right? Why can't we produce our own I-beams?
Well, it's a matter of technology. One of the hallmarks of the industry is constant innovation. That's what we have had to do to continue to compete. And so it's a matter of, the types of factories and lines that you need to invest in. And so again, just over time, over the decades of free trade, we've specialized in certain things and have kind of gotten out of the business of other things. And that's just, the natural progression of an industry that there's a lot of competition internationally in this industry. And the other really major impact or issue in steel that doesn't really impact any other industry is the fact that there's so much overcapacity. China keeps pumping out steel, and they don't more than they need domestically, and more than the world needs, really. And so there's that issue that we really do have to protect ourselves from China, and we're completely aligned with the U.S. on that. We've made a lot of actions in aligning ourselves, harmonizing ourselves, so that they feel confident that we're not the transshipment route for Chinese steel. But obviously, not all of that has gone for naught, and it has not been recognized by this current administration.
All right. So in the United States, the whole idea behind tariffs is to develop, or one of the key ideas, to my knowledge anyway, is to develop a domestic manufacturing capability. Yet I would think that the cost structure would be significantly increased if you're doing that, as opposed to bringing steel in from China, where labor prices are much lower and manufacturing is much less expensive. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, that's the problem. Chinese steel is being dumped into markets that can't protect themselves unfairly. I mean, this is unfairly traded steel because they don't abide by the rules of supply and demand, and these state-owned industries just keep pumping it out. And so we do have to have a protective barrier around our economy, but we do as well require competition to continue to innovate and bring down the price of steel, so that it's not expensive to be building the really important infrastructure that we rely on every single day. So yes, they're putting up trade barriers around that country. If you look at the data from the 2018 tariffs, the only people that are going to actually benefit from this are the producers in the United States, the steel producers. And we have actually, the USW is calling out these tariffs, or against these tariffs, because the last time around, those revenue gains never made itself down into the workforce and the wages of the workers. So this is completely unnecessary, and only a handful of people, at the expense of the much broader economy, will actually benefit from these tariffs.
All right. When it comes to steel manufacturing and fabrication here in Canada, where are their markets generally into the United States?
Well, we have a really, really strong and vibrant domestic fabrication industry. There's fabricators, near every community in Canada. You have to. You think about the arenas, hockey, the schools, the hospitals, et cetera. In fact, I know that my chair, Tim Houtsma, who's with Merit Industries out in the Halifax area, is listening right now. The fabricators are the guys that engineer the steel that comes in, put the holes in it, do the connections, and then get it right and ready for the job site. And it's a really important component to the industry. A lot of the steel that we use in certain types of buildings do come from Canada. A lot we have to source elsewhere. Some of the work of our fabricators is in the U.S. There are many that just serve our domestic industries in our communities. There are many that are able to compete in the U.S. because they're so goddamn good at what they do. And so that's the real concern is those folks that have succeeded in winning bids in the U.S. market, competing against American fabricators, and this is what helps drive down the cost of projects in the U.S. So they want to completely protect themselves from any sort of competition, which is obviously just going to drive up costs.
I would think it would make it extremely difficult for tendering contracts, especially big contracts like hospitals and these types of things would stretch out years. It must be very, very difficult to be able to tender big projects because of the uncertainty here.
Yeah, right now we know of many of our fabricators here who they work with American customers who love what they do, but who are just saying it's probably best you not bid on this right now. We can't deal with the uncertainty. We have no idea what the price is going to be on the steel, this major component to this project, and we also don't know whether there will be any delays at the border. as well. So again, uncertainty is just the biggest Achilles heel to business and to a healthy economy. And you think a businessman in the White House would get that, but he's something else. It's not. He's not a business genius. That's for sure.
That's for sure. Keanin, thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Todd.
All right, take care. Keanin Loomis, President and CEO of the Canadian Institute of Steel Construction. This op-ed from Larry Hughes, Tariffs and Nova Scotia's Energy Future. Where will natural gas come from? Larry Hughes joins the show when we come back. Larry Hughes, Dalhousie University engineering professor whose area of expertise includes energy systems and climate change, joins us for a chat. Professor Hughes, thanks for joining the show as always.
My pleasure, Todd.
All right, an interesting op-ed in the Examiner this week. Tariffs and Nova Scotia's Energy Future. Where will natural gas come from? And lots to unpackage here, I guess. So I guess first off, give everybody kind of the broad strokes of some of the key points that you were making here.
Okay, the big question, first question is, what do we use natural gas for in the province? And most of the natural gas is for Nova Scotia Power. About 2/3 of the natural gas we get. Government and commercial, about 1/4. Industry, a bit under 10%. And other, including residential, is well under 2%. So the big user of natural gas in the province is Nova Scotia Power. Where does the natural gas come from? Well, it used to come from offshore, but now it's all coming from the United States. And of course, the big fear is with the Trump tariffs and possible impact on the Canadian dollar, what would that do to the price of natural gas being exported into Canada from the United States or imported into Canada? And what I looked at was the different scenarios Nova Scotia Power has for the future, and essentially asked how much natural gas are we going to use and where will it come from?
And of course, how reliable how much can we depend on it if it's coming from the United States as well? Just straight up concern about that, right?
Oh, absolutely. We are dealing with a great unknown. My big concern, of course, as I said earlier, would be the cost of the natural gas, because if the natural gas price goes up for some reason, because of the Canadian dollar falling, for example, Nova Scotians, well, in fact, anyone using natural gas in the United States could be affected by this. And as I said before, you might not be using natural gas directly, but you could be using it indirectly through your electricity.
All right. What about Western natural gas? We simply are cut off from the Western supply because we don't have any pipelines. There's no way of getting it here. That's correct, is it?
Well, I was thinking about this after writing the article, and there's a circuitous route, which Paraday, which you may recall from the past, and Repsol in St. John, they were talking about having LNG export. That is, they would liquefy the natural gas for export to Europe. When they looked at that, the only pipeline they had was the Maritime and Northeast pipeline that goes into Maine and then into the North American network. The assumption was, at least in Paraday's case, they would be pumping Western Canadian gas that Paraday owned, or they owned the fields. They would pump the gas into the network, and it would appear here. So the long and short of it is, even if we could access Western Canadian natural gas, it would be coming through the United States. Wow.
What about our own supply here in shale, and you talk about that in the piece, and obviously it would be years to scale that up, I would assume. What about scaling up, even if we had the desire and the will, and it looks like this current government certainly does, but what about scaling up our own supply? How long would might that look?
If we have time, I'd like to just take a quick step back.
Sure.
And say that there is another potential way of getting Western Canadian gas to Nova Scotia,
okay.
and that would be through Quebec. And you might say, well, how is that going to work? Well, there was a proposal, and it was canned about 3 or 4 years ago, to run a pipeline from the Trans-Canada main line from Western Canada, and then a branch into Quebec and appearing in Port Saguenay. And that would then, there was going to be a liquefaction plant there, and some of that natural gas could have been brought to Nova Scotia and, for example, taken to the St. John LNG gasification facility and put into the pipeline there. Now, I didn't look at that in the piece, but that, again, it was one of these things that occurred to me afterwards. But to your earlier point, with respect to Nova Scotia's natural gas, and yes, the province is certainly, for lack of a better word, gung-ho or excited about anything and everything they can get out of the ground in Nova Scotia. And so years ago, probably 15, 20, 30 years ago, there was exploration done. No, less than that, sorry, I was thinking of something else. But anyway, in the past 15 or 20 years, there has been exploration for natural gas, and they have found shale gas in the Windsor area, and they've also found coal bed methane. And to extract either of these, you would probably need hydraulic fracturing, and that is commonly known as fracking. And so that would require underground, horizontal drilling underground, rupturing the rock to let the natural gas escape. And that could then be connected to either a spur to the Maritimes and Northeast, or I was even thinking perhaps you'd have some sort of trucking system that would take the natural gas, as you see them on the highways these days, to a natural gas plant. So how long would it take? You are correct. It's not going to be something we're going to do overnight. It's going to take multiple years because a proper location has to be found. There has to be environmental assessment done to make sure it's done right, because the last thing we want is for humans or the environment as we know it to be affected by this in any way. And if it can be proven that it can be done safely, and that's the key, it could start being extracted for the province. But as you said, this is going to take years.
Have there been evolutions in the technology when it comes to fracturing, and that makes it more reliable or more environmentally sustainable and friendly?
From what I understand from work the United States EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, has done, they have found that much of the problem is on the surface as opposed to under the surface. And that is chemical spills on the surface, the poor handling of the chemicals on the surface. With respect to the coal bed methane, you have an additional problem. You in addition to getting the methane, you also get a lot of salt water, and the question there would be how would it be disposed of. But fracking, from what I understand, the technology has improved, and if it was done right, it would probably be a fairly clean process. One concern people do have is tremors, earth tremors, and so forth. These do happen, and again, one would like to think that, and this again would require the best possible science, to explain ways in which it could be minimized.
All right, so what's your instinct tell you? Do you think that it's inevitable we'll be fracking here in Nova Scotia?
Probably, and the thing is, one can only, not so much hope, it must be done correctly. It can't simply be a case of sort of let cowboys loose on it and start extracting the natural gas and having a ton of problems with it. It has to be done properly, and apparently, in some places, it is done properly. And if we can take their practices as best practices, we should use those. The other thing I'm concerned about is, and the same thing with the offshore, it was extracted and sent it to Boston. I mean, we can't get it out of here fast enough. And so, and yes, the argument was we needed somebody to, a major anchor to pay for all this. Well, that wasn't sort of the way it was talked about at the beginning. At the beginning, it was, oh my goodness, all this natural gas from Nova Scotia. My fear would be, my God, we've got natural gas. Let's get it out of the province quick. Because there does strike me at times to be this colonial mentality that we dig it out and ship it off to somebody else. If we're going to dig it out and have it available, it should be here for Nova Scotians first. And that would be for Nova Scotia Power to allow our wind and solar, those variable resources, to be incorporated smoothly and correctly, and allow the province to have a very clean electricity system.
Interesting as always, Larry. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it, and we'll do it again.
I hope so. See you.
All right, take care. Larry Hughes, Dalhousie University engineering professor, whose expertise includes engine and energy systems and climate change. Military now accepting recruits with asthma, ADHD, and other conditions amid staffing shortages. We'll talk about this when we come back.
Thanks.
All right, joining us is Scott Taylor of Esprit de Corps Magazine in Ottawa. Scott Taylor, how was your vacation? You had a nice time down south, did you?
Way too short, my friend. We left here in the Snowmageddon and returned to Snowmageddon.
That's the hardest part of a vacation like that is coming back, eh?
Well, we actually had our furnace vents had clogged up, so our house was freezing cold. The furnace had shut off. So.
Oh my.
Yeah, a bit of a scare.
Yeah, no blown pipes or anything like that, obviously.
No, but the cat was not happy. The fur coat came in handy.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, all right. This story on the CBC website, as the Canadian Armed Forces continue to try and dig out of a deep recruitment hole, they're starting to give new recruits with medical conditions a shot at joining the military rather than automatically turning them away. The Major General Scott Malcolm, the Surgeon General, says the forces will now consider applicants with any and all conditions for enrollment, including ADHD, anxiety, and asthma. What's your response to this?
I really don't know why they're lowering the standards or changing these restrictions when they've told us that they had 70,000 people applied a year ago to get in, but because the system's so backlogged, they could only process like 4,300. That was the problem. The problem wasn't getting healthy applicants to go into the recruiting centers and sign up. And in fact, after they required the limitation on being a citizen so that you could just be a permanent resident, they had some 20,000 permanent residents applied, but because of security clearances, I think only a couple of dozen actually got through and got into the system, the pipeline. The pipeline is broken at the recruiting level, not the recruiting level, the training level. So to say we're going to start lowering these standards so people with ADHD can join, people with asthma can join because somehow the requirements for soldiering have changed. I don't understand why they would do that if that's not the problem. Why are you trying to fix it where it's not broken?
So where did this come from then? What are your thoughts on how this came about?
May have had legal challenges or people that's just the idea that we can say we're going to open it up. If you recall, not that long ago, they actually reduced there was restrictions on people with visible tattoos and piercings and whatnot, and they reduced all that. They said that, but then again, someone come out and said that was never the problem. Those people aren't the ones applying in recruiting centers, and we're getting enough coming through the door. And another, of course, the problem with the personnel shortage that they've got now, one of the biggest problems is retention. It's keeping the people with the skill sets long enough that they can train the next generation. It's not about just simply getting more people in the door. They've got the 1-year Navy experience program that's underway now for people to get in, and they think that they're going to serve for a year and just love the Navy, even though they don't have a trade and they're going to sea. That hasn't really panned out in the numbers that they thought it would either. So they're trying everything, but if what they say is true, if they're getting 70,000 people going into recruiting centers, why would you need to make this change in terms of the medical criteria for them getting in?
All right, in the story, defense and security expert Andrew Latham says the former medical screening process was overly stringent and unrealistic because it turned away people who were perfectly capable of doing many jobs, and he relates it to not everybody's available or not everybody is cut out to be a firefighter or a frontline worker in that, or a police officer or something like that. But there are other jobs in the administrative field and things like that. Is that a good argument, do you think?
So there are different levels of physicality required in different branches and different trades, that's for sure. But one of the things traditionally has been that if you start off as an infantier and you're fully physically capable, and then you get injured on the job and you can do a reduced capacity, then the system can absorb you. You can continue to serve, but in a different trade. Whereas if you're recruiting from the street, people who already have restrictions on what they can do. Mm-hmm. That only further dilutes the pot or the pool. I mean, it means the people that then are serving as an infantier and get injured, they have no place to go. So, yes, there are different demands in different jobs and trades, but to start out by recruiting people who have these conditions that before would have precluded them from joining, and again, you've got to presume that when you go through the list and it says if you have ADHD and take medicine for that in daily requirement, you're not eligible. Then you wouldn't take the time to go into a recruiting center and bung up the system. So if they're still getting 70,000 people that don't have these prior conditions, then why would you need to change it?
All right, Canada's military, citing the story here, is short more than 13,000 members in its regular forces and reserve forces combined. A total of about 72,000 members in a reserve force of 30,000 members. So how do we come up with the number of what our forces should be? Who determines how many people should be in the Canadian Armed Forces?
Well, this is, they set an authorized strength, and it's based on what they presume that they're going to need when they have their defense policy, what they would need to deploy, what they would need to sustain a deployment of a certain number of troops. Like our battle group in Latvia is supposed to grow to 2,500. It's currently 800. The Army right now is so under strength, it's very difficult for them to even train and maintain 800. But because the promise was made to NATO that we're going to jump that to 2,500 this year, they've had to do away with proving exercises, which is what they used to do before they would be sent off to Latvia. They would do an all-arms, combined arms approving or exercise so everybody was in lockstep. Now they've cut that out, and they're going to get on-the-job training once they get into Latvia with the rest of the brigade. So they are cutting corners. And when you're talking about the dangerous situation in Europe, them being a tripwire defense, etc., it seems a little bit ridiculous that we would take that and cut out that measure, but they simply can't do any more with what they've got.
All right. Do you think that with the real threat of war, and we see war in Europe, and we've got a battle group with close proximity in Latvia, do you feel as though that helps recruitment, or does that hinder recruitment?
I think we saw a spike, and that was where the Chief of Defense Staff made some comment that just since the remarks from newly inaugurated President Trump about making us the 51st state, they've seen an uptick in recruiting people who are proud Canadians,
right,
saying, "Hey, well, I'm prepared. I'm prepared to defend my right to remain Canadian," which that brings it pretty close to home. Never mind a battle group sitting in Latvia, but if people on our own border are threatening to annex us, I'm proud that people are responding in that way because I'm a proud Canadian myself. So I do not want to become an American citizen.
How about pay? We often hear some politicians, and Chrystia Freeland in particular comes to mind, saying that the military needs to be paid significantly more. What are your thoughts on pay?
That is the quickest and the easiest solution, pay and housing. If they could just simply provide housing. I know there's people in Halifax that are still couch surfing, looking for permanent accommodations from they're in the military. That there's been stories on that before. The Chronicle Herald's done stuff. That's a situation that shouldn't be the case. And stories like that come out. It's not going to do much for recruiting. But if people are out and showing what great lodgings they had and what excellent paychecks they had, and this is a way to just immediately inflate the defense budget towards that 2%, that supposed 2% milestone, which is ridiculous in itself. But the fact is, we are to spend that. Keep people in, offer them signing bonuses, find creative ways to beef that up, and you're putting money into the hands of military personnel who will then in turn pump it into the economy. It's not like you're just wasting it. So it's not going to increase our defense capability, but at the same time it's going to make for happier military personnel and probably be a huge boon to recruiting.
Inflation is really hurting because, I mean, even $75,000, $80,000 a year now, in which I think master corporals would be in that range or something like that. to your point, living in some of these cities like Ottawa, even Halifax now, housing and inflation is like everybody's getting whacked by inflation here, and military is no exception.
But it used to be, I mean, that was when they built the personnel married quarters and they had the barracks on the bases. I mean, they weren't what we would expect by today's standards, but for the standards of the time, they were fairly decent housing. And now, I mean, they should be keeping pace with that. I know all kinds of developers in the Ottawa area that would love to partner with the military to build like rental housing which could be all included. There's all kinds of creative ways that they could do this, but we're not seeing any effort on the part of this, and we know that even like the different people like the ombudsman, et cetera, have been pushing on these things, and for some reason there's just a lack of action. And of course, that would be something which the bases are all across Canada. It would be something which would be distributed in all the different areas to construction companies. You'd be pumping money in the Canadian defense budget right back into Canadian builders and Canadian developers.
How about equipment?
Improving the lives of soldiers, you know.
That's right. What about equipment and having a modernized equipment for forces? That matters, obviously. What are your thoughts on modernizing our equipment and the challenge that comes along with that?
Well, we've had a advanced or forward-based battle group in Latvia with no actual ground-to-air defense and no real drone protection. Since 2017, and well, you know, the war broke out for real in 2022 in neighboring Ukraine, and we still haven't. We put an urgent basis on. I think they're close or very close to deploying it, but you know, if you're going to be sent into what could easily be harm's way, you'd want to think your government was going to make sure you've got all the protection you need. And certainly since the beginning of February, like 3 years ago in 2022. We saw that the drone is now the master of the modern battlefield, and the Canadian government, they've recently stated that they still have no office set up or no plans to procure large numbers of these first-person view drones, which is what everyone sees as the new artillery on the battlefield.
How close are we to getting the frigates up? I mean, this is something I know it's laughable at this point, isn't it?
It is. When you think of what we could do in terms of building a navy and ships in World War II, and we did it all in less than 6 years. I mean, the amount of hulls that were in the water, and they were outfitted and patrolling the Atlantic in no time. And these things are taking, you know, when you look back on the records, even of the supply ship, I think it was supposed to originally be 2 of them in the water by 2012, and here we are 2025, and they finally got one in the water on the West Coast. So, I mean, it's just the timelines on these, it's laughable. I mean, and then to talk about buying 12 submarines as well, and that's I don't think I'll live to see them in the water.
Yeah. But technology is a huge challenge with these, because technology evolves and it gets outdated quicker than it can be installed and used. That's a big challenge, isn't it?
Which, I mean, everything that we're buying now, and it's changing. You know, your phone is outdated by the time you get it unwrapped. But these guys, I mean, they're talking about picking up an F-35 and that's going to serve Canada for the next 50 years. It's like, if you think you can predict what the future of aviation is going to be in 50 years, I mean, I don't think that's the case. Absolutely. Scott, always interesting. Glad your pipes didn't freeze, and welcome back. Yeah, and the cat's warm again. All right, take care. All right, take care. Scott Taylor of Esprit de Corps Magazine. We're going to talk about Canadian Transplant Association Lace Up for Life event. Find out what it's all about when we come back. The Canadian Transplant Association Lace Up for Life event. What is this all about? Kristofer Woods joins us, Maritime Director, Canadian Transplant Association. Chris, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me. All right, so what is the event? Tell us all about the event, when it's taking place, and what's involved. So Lace Up for Life is a free open skate organized by the Canadian Transplant Association. And our hopes are that people impacted by organ donation, whether you're a recipient, a donor, a family member of a deceased donor, or just a supporter, you would come out and have some fun together. We're encouraging people to wear green, that is the color, associated with organ donation. There's going to be free hot chocolate and snacks provided. No registration is required. And yeah, it's just a time to get together, to network and to grow in connections for those impacted by organ donations. March 1st, and where's the venue? So it's going to be at Sackville Sports Stadium on from 11 to 3 p.m.
Okay, you kind of cut out when you said, say that the venue again?
Sackville Sports Stadium.
Okay, on March 1st.
On March 1st from 11 to 3 p.m.
All right, so tell us more about just by some general information when it comes to awareness and the importance of this whole topic, because it's not discussed a lot for whatever reason, but just kind of raise some valid points that you'd like people to know about concerning awareness and why they should be interested in this.
So the province of Nova Scotia is unique in that we are the only jurisdiction, to my knowledge, in North America with implied consent. So everyone is an organ donor unless you choose to opt out. But there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. There's still barriers in place for people who want to step forward to become organ donors. There's still some work that needs to be done on raising awareness on what does it mean to be an organ donor? How does it impact your life if you choose to become a living organ donor? How do you have those conversations with your loved ones about that decision to want to donate and why it's important to you? I'm a living kidney donor myself, and I've seen firsthand the impact organ donation makes in the lives of those who need that life-saving transplant. So this opportunity is for those who've been impacted by organ donation, whether a recipient themselves or someone who's donated. Maybe you've been part of those conversations and had to make those difficult decisions to donate an organ of a loved one. It impacts people's lives. It changes people's recovery outcomes. And the process of transplant is a very isolating experience. There's not many people I know in my life who've had a transplant, so I can only imagine the limited number of resources available to those who've gone through those experiences and who they can talk to, who they can network with, who they can share common stories with. So this is an event that's hopefully going to provide an opportunity for people who have been impacted to network, to make new connections, to establish friendships, something we think is really important for those communities.
Okay, you mentioned the implied consent changes. How has that impacted the numbers? And I'm assuming that it has, but what's happened with the numbers since implied consent's been adopted here in Nova Scotia?
Yeah, we don't know. And that's something that we're trying to get some information on. I know there are some barriers, with the doctor shortage. I know that in many circumstances, someone who wants to step forward and become an organ donor, a living organ donor, needs a family doctor to follow up with them. I also know that there's issues around OR availability and surgeon availability. So even though we have implied consent, I still don't have that information on how implied consent has increased our numbers. So that is something we're working on getting. I know the province is still doing research and collecting data on all of that. So I'm hoping that we have some information around how that has impacted organ donation in the province soon.
Why do you think it's been slow in releasing this information? I would think it would be information that would be of great value and not controversial, I wouldn't think, at this point. What are your thoughts on why there's been a slow to get this information to the public?
I'm not exactly sure. There's a lot of data out there around the benefit of organ donation, but in terms of the release of this information, I don't know if it's just that they haven't communicated it with us, or that perhaps they've sent it out to people and they've not passed that along to organizations such as ours. I'm not exactly sure.
Okay. And so when it comes to some general information, if people want to know more about all this or they want to consider being an organ donor or information in general, where's a good location for people to go online to get all the info that they might need?
So in Nova Scotia, if you want to learn more about donating an organ, you can contact the Multi-Organ Transplant Program. They facilitate transplants for all maritime provinces. So if you're in Newfoundland, if you're in New Brunswick, if you're in PEI, if you're in Nova Scotia, those would be the people that you would want to get information from. The Canadian Transplant Association is a volunteer-led registered charitable organization that supports people post-transplant. So we have information and resources available on our website. Some other events that you might recognize us from is we are the hosts of the Canadian Transplant Games, which is the largest organ donation awareness event in Canada. And coming up on April 7th is Green Shirt Day, something the Transplant Association is also very proud to present across the country. So there's lots of resources available, but in Nova Scotia, it would be the multi-organ transplant program.
All right, and of course, the Canadian Transplant Association Lace Up for Life event goes March 1st in Sackville, correct?
Correct.
Okay, listen, appreciate your time, Chris. Thanks so much for doing this.
I really appreciate the time, too. Thanks so much.
Have a great event. Take care. Kristofer Woods, Maritime Director, Canadian Transplant Association. Sounds like a great event. Again, March 1st. Check it out online. Just Google the Canadian Transplant Association Lace Up for Life event, and lots of great information there. If you have a health-related question or concern, give us a call, 902-405-6000. Dr. John Gillis and House Calls. Again, 902-405-6000. That is the way to get in on the action. House Calls when we come back.
Dr. John, you're my medicine man. Dr. John, you're my medicine man. I don't use no potion. I don't use no pill.
All right, you heard the familiar chime, House Calls with Dr. John Gillis. If you've got a health-related question or concern, give us a call at 902-405-6000. That's the way to do it. Again, 902-405-6000. In the meantime, of course, we will take your calls. Your calls, general calls, I guess we could call it. An open hour goes from noon until 1. And something that I will be asking you, and I will ask, is did you watch the Liberal leadership debate last night? And if so, what were your thoughts? Did anybody impress you? Did anybody disappoint you? And I talked about this when I kicked off the show, and I won't say too much right now because I'll share most of my comments for later. But I thought it was quite dull, and what else can you expect, right? Or what else should you expect? But I was not inspired in any way, shape, or form by any of them. And I thought that, and I mentioned this earlier, that Frank Baylis actually, to me, sounded pretty good amongst the four. Anyway, we can talk about that later in the show when we have your calls between noon and 1. In the meantime, as mentioned, it's time for House Calls with Dr. John Gillis. Give us a buzz at 902-405-6000 if you'd like to chat with the doctor, if you've got a health-related question or concern. Dr. Gillis with a wealth of knowledge and experience ready to impart his wisdom as best he can over the phone. 902-405-6000. That is the way to do it. Dr. John Gillis, how are you today?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm doing all right. The Leafs were down 3-0 last night in Boston and actually came back and won in overtime. I was talking to Dan earlier this morning. I can't remember the last time the Leafs have done anything like that in Boston. Pretty impressive. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree. It hasn't happened in years, and they usually do it the other way. They get a lead and they completely bottle. So I, in fact, forgot they were on last night. I saw the score and I thought I was in the Twilight Zone. So, all good.
Yeah, indeed. Exciting stuff for sure. How was your schedule this week? Did you work the ER?
No, not this week. I was in there twice last week, and it was busy times. But it's bed block completely again. Last Wednesday night, 20 admits, and just not a good way to work. No, it seems to be the normal now.
Yeah, indeed. 902-405-6000. Yeah, at some point you have to kind of realign or recalibrate what's normal and what isn't normal, and that's just the reality, right?
That's it, but it's sad that we've come to accept it, and we shouldn't. It's not good for anybody. Patients, morale, all of it. It's but it's become all too normal.
Indeed,
41 to 45 patients waiting to be seen, 25 admitted patients. It's just not normal.
Yeah, for sure. 902-405-6000. As mentioned, if you've got a health-related question or concern, again, 902-405-6000. I got an email question. I'm going to start with this. I've got some other things I want to get to as well, including a measles outbreak. But Dawn asks this: can the doctor explain the different classifications of someone's medical condition, such as serious, critical, or any other classification? That's from Dawn.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. Is it written down somewhere? Probably. I could not possibly tell you that off the top of my head. I think and different jurisdictions may have different criteria. It is somewhat arbitrary in trying to give people a sense of how grave they are. Are there criteria that someone's done somewhere along the way? Probably so. I don't know the answer to that. I'll look that up and I'll see if we can report back something a little later.
Okay, sounds good. I wanted to ask you about a lot of talk, of course, about the Pope and his medical condition and double pneumonia. And explain what double pneumonia is for those who don't know.
Well, I mean, it basically means both lungs and, affecting multiple areas. And I'm pretty sure he had some lung issues younger in his life. So, respiratory infections in the elderly are more serious than in younger, healthy people. They have less lung capacity, less ability to fight them. And, I think this is what he's fighting is an infection in both lungs, which, is quite serious in his case.
How do you treat it? Oxygen, I guess, or what's the treatment for this?
Well, I mean, when we use the term pneumonia, we're usually referring to a bacterial infection, and that the treatment for that is antibiotics, depending on what bug it is. Viruses, particularly in the elderly, can have a severe impact on the lungs as well, and sometimes we need, in some cases, antivirals or steroids to, in either case, to help with the inflammation and wheezing. It really depends on what bug he's fighting and some of the other factors around his general health.
902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000 if you've got a health-related question or concern. Measles. There have been 95 measles cases reported in Canada so far this year, with Quebec, Ontario, and Manitoba reporting new cases in the last week. This, according to the Chief Public Health Officer. This is something that we've talked about before. A lack of immunization is at play here. Is that the main reason? Is that the main issue going on? At one point, we pretty much eradicated measles in Canada, did we not?
Yeah, no, that's exactly what's going on. There's a big outbreak in Texas right now as well, and and another one in New Mexico. At a time when some of these health authorities in certain states, shall we say, are ending mandatory vaccinations and not on conditions that are fairly new or less tested. I mean, some of these vaccines are 30 years old, and they're still talking about ending their mandatory use, which is scary.
How do you know, doctor, what you've been vaccinated for? I don't even know what I've been vaccinated for. I'm assuming that I ran the gamut, born in 1969, circa that era. I think it was pretty much a standard procedure that babies were inoculated for a whole host of things. But is that a good question, or what can you tell us?
Well, most people have, a card or did at some point in their life that they carry with them. A lot of this stuff has been imported online, through the way vaccines are tracked now. You have a profile in this province that can see what you had, and people have the ability to upload stuff into that. So a lot of it would be based on when you were born and what the standards were then. What was being given at birth, in school and that sort of thing. And that has changed over the years, and, certainly encourage people to keep track of it and, for their own benefit. And, when you have kids and everything, to keep track of what they've had. Increasingly, it's tracked by what's always typically been tracked by one's family doctor, and is increasingly tracked online. So there's a record of it, but, people do forget, and it's important. I ask people all the time what they've had, and a lot of times they remember, or they've had a card, but often we get, I got to check with my doc. Yeah. The problem is people may not have a doctor, and to keep track of these things. So that can be a challenge.
All right. So I guess if somebody doesn't know, and is there a test to know whether you've been vaccinated for measles or whatever? Is there any way to find out other than public records?
Yeah. So for a lot of conditions, you can get a titer done, meaning a blood test that will tell you if you're immunized or not. For some, it's not the case. It's sort of individual. So, I mean, if there is a question, measles is one of them where you can get a titer to determine if you're immunized. hepatitis is another one. There are some where that's not possible. So it's a matter of trying to determine what you think you may need, and talk to your health professional about completing the course. The website in Nova Scotia is Vax Record Nova Scotia, where they track vaccines based on health card, and you create an account, and that will, much like the My Health Record is trying to keep track of things people have done. It's still a work in progress, but it's definitely a step in the right direction.
Is there any preferential age to be vaccinated against measles? I'm assuming the babies, but can adults get the vaccination, or?
The vaccine is MMR, mumps, measles, rubella, and you may remember a few years ago we had a mumps outbreak, and we had determined that people of a certain age group hadn't had 2 doses. I think it may have been below 1970, and we were encouraging people to go in and get a second dose of MMR vaccine. Yeah, so there is a sort of a standard protocol, and this stuff is sort of tracked and watched. So if you don't know what you've had, it may be that somebody decides they want to give you a mumps, measles, rubella booster if it's unclear, or they want to do your titer. Sometimes it's just easier to give the booster because there's little harm in doing so.
Okay, 902-405-6000. Josh is giving us a call. Hello, Josh.
Hey, how you doing?
Doing well.
So I'm calling regarding, I got a pituitary tumor. It's quite small, but it's been causing me some issues for the last almost 8 or 9 months now. I've seen endocrinologist and the surgeon, and they don't believe that it's causing my symptoms, but I'm just kind of looking for a second opinion. I've been really spaced out and getting a lot of headaches. Just wondering, is there something I can take to kind of relieve the state, like the spacing out feeling is really the worst thing, and the headaches? Is there something I can take for that?
Well, there's a lot of things you can take for headaches. I mean, it depends what you've tried to date. I mean, starting with simple things like Tylenol, ibuprofen, Aleve, going through all sorts of...
I've taken that, and that doesn't seem to work.
Yeah, so, there's a lot of different painkillers one can take. I mean, the sensation of feeling spaced out, I mean, that's a very arbitrary feeling. I have no doubt you feel unwell, but, to correlate that with something that's going to take it away, that's a tougher one. If you've been worked up, by the surgeon and they don't think that the tumor is the cause of it, then, you should talk to your health professional about, another diagnosis of why you're having headaches. Is it something unrelated? Is it sinus headache? Is it a migraine? Is it a tension headache? And try to determine what the most appropriate treatment is for that. But that's probably all I can tell you.
Yeah, because I also have blurred vision from time to time, and I've been put through I'm waiting to see I don't know how to say it, optometrist or something like that. Something to do with my eyes, because my eyes are bothering me as well. Like, I'm really sensitive to light. My eyes are very sensitive to light, so I'm wondering if maybe that's the cause of the headaches. But anyways, I'm just always trying to get a second opinion, because it's just been bugging the heck out of me, right?
Oh, sure. And look, eye strain can do that. I got LASIK years ago. My distance vision's perfect, but now that I'm old and if I don't wear my reading glasses, I'll get the odd headache. Migraines, one of the features of migraines is light sensitivity, but also if your eyes are straining or tired all the time, they can become sensitive to light. So, going to get a check with the optometrist is definitely a good idea.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. Thank you very much.
Okay, Josh. Good luck. Take care. 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us for house calls with Dr. John Gillis. If you've got a health-related question or concern, we've got some open lines for you. 902-405-6000. House calls continues when we come back. It's House Calls with Dr. John Gillis. Give us a buzz, 902-405-6000 if you have a health-related question or concern. 902-405-6000. Dan's giving us a call. Hello, Dan.
Hey, Todd. Hi, John. How you doing? I have a polycystic kidney disease, and I'm wondering if creatine is not a good thing to take with that or not.
Yeah, I mean, I think polycystic kidneys by themselves don't harm your kidney function. Have you been told that you have a decline in your kidney function?
No, my kidney function seems to be the same as it always was. I just have been told I have one giant, that's the doctor's term, a 7.5 centimeter tumor on my right kidney. Well, she said cyst, and it hasn't seemed to be giving me any problems. But creatine gives me a ton of energy when I play sports or hike. So I was wondering if there was any danger in taking it.
I mean, the general rule is if you have kidney disease, meaning a loss of function, you should be careful with it or not take it. People sometimes take too much of it. Having, cysts in your kidney or polycystic kidneys doesn't necessarily mean that your function is declined. So I would, double check with, whoever you're seeing that these words are confusing. Creatine, which is the supplement, sounds a lot like creatinine, which is the measurement of kidney function, which is what you want to make sure is normal.
I see. So if it's normal, then I can take creatine?
That's generally the case, yeah. I'd check with your family doctor.
Okay. That's great. Thanks a lot. We used to play hockey together. I was a goalie. I could never save the damn thing.
Okay, Dan. Good luck. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. Here's a quick email question, then we'll go back to the phones. This question from Pam says, in my blood work, I've been showing high potassium. This is the first time this has been a problem. Are there certain foods that might elevate your potassium, and is it dangerous?
I mean, yeah, there are foods that can, are high in potassium, like bananas, but, high potassium is normally not caused by food. It's normally caused by medications or, kidney problems. So, I'd sort of look at, what the baseline cause of that is. It's not normal just to get a high potassium from food.
Okay, 902-405-6000. John's giving us a call. Hello, John.
Good day. Question for the doctor.
Okay.
Question for the doctor on shingles. You guys were talking about measles earlier on.
Yeah.
I think shingles are the same family of infection. Question is, understanding that provincial government is rolling out a free shingles vaccination program for seniors sometime soon. And the second part of that question is, once you get a shingles vaccine, how soon or how long should you wait to get a second?
The second part, Shingrix is 2 doses. I think it's 2 to 6 months apart. There's a break between them. What we usually tell people is, just to schedule time and, bear in mind that you can sometimes feel unwell with one or both. So if you have a big day the next day, don't get the vaccine that day. But, the impact of a bad case of shingles in terms of chronic pain or what have you, is far worse than that. And I hadn't seen that they were rolling out a program. I think that's good. I think, as we've said before, these things often take time, and they're related to, do they work? What are they preventing? And, what's the cost? And often as costs come down, governments, start to look at these things. And again, this was, I believe, a campaign promise of the current government, and for people over 65. So it looks like it's coming down, but it is quite expensive. I mean, I think the average cost was in the $160 or $170 range, and if you're getting it at a pharmacy, you have to pay to get it injected. So it wasn't insignificant, and certainly happy to see this happen.
Okay, perfect. So, Doc, just to go back there, you said 2 shots 6 months apart. So after you've done the 2 shots 6 months apart, when would you have to go back for an upgrade after that?
I think they say that shingles vaccine lasts at least 10 years. I mean, I think if you're older, just this is from memory, I think they say it's 10 years if you're getting it between 50 and 70, and I think the protection may go down if you're older than that. So it is worth reviewing, with your doctor. But I think, they talk 7 to 10 years after being fully vaccinated.
Okay, perfect. Appreciate your help.
Okay. All right. Good luck. Take care. 902-405-6000 if you'd like to chat with Dr. John Gillis. If you've got a health-related question or concern, 902-405-6000. That is the way to do it. Again, 902-405-6000. House Calls continues when we come back. All right, it's House Calls with Dr. John Gillis. We got the doctor to the top of the hour. We got some room for you as well. Give us a call at 902-405-6000 if you've got a health-related question or concern. Give us a buzz. As mentioned, the number 902-405-6000. This email question from Sam. Doctor says, I am 85 and know I was vaccinated for measles and such before I went to school at age 6. Would that vaccination still be working for me, and should I get vaccinated again? And I think you talked about a booster earlier, but what's your advice, Doc?
Sir, does it say how old the person is?
85.
Yeah, so I honestly don't know off the top of my head. I think most people in that age group have herd immunity, because they've been around so long, been exposed to that stuff. That's what I remember from memory. I'll double check that. But if you're 85 and you're concerned about your vaccines, you really should check with your family doctor just to look at your history to see what you've had and when. So, but I'll double check that.
All right, herd immunity. That's a term that I haven't heard since the COVID days, since the pandemic. Herd immunity. That is generally, we talked about measles and eradicating measles. Was herd immunity at play, or was vaccination, or is it a combination of both?
Yeah, it's a combination, yes. So I just looked this up. The Canadian Immunization Guide recommends measles, mumps, rubella vaccines for adults born in or after 1970. So I mentioned that earlier. I actually had that backwards. So they were, when the mumps thing reared its head, there was sort of an age cohort where they were worried about people that wouldn't have had two, but they determined if you were before 1970, and this applies to measles as well, that you're assumed to have immunity based on just exposure, lifetime exposure, previous exposure, or herd immunity that you may have acquired from a parent or that sort of thing. So generally speaking, if you're 85, you're born before 1970, you wouldn't need it, but always double check with your family doctor if you're at particular risk or what have you, or if you were concerned you may have a higher risk.
Okay, good information. This story, wanted to get your take on it. The Canadian Medical Association is calling on governments and policymakers to seize the moment and facilitate nationwide licensing for doctors, allowing them to practice in any province or territory at any time. What's your take on this, Doctor?
Oh, it's the way it should be. I mean, it's heading there now. I mean, in Atlantic Canada, we have the Atlantic Registry, so for a fee each year, if you have a Nova Scotia license, you're licensed in the other 3 Atlantic provinces. But it is cumbersome if you want to work elsewhere in the country, and I think there's been a lot of talk of this in general lately. We have trade barriers amongst our provinces, and you're hearing politicians now, as we look away from the U.S., talk about the fact that it's harder to do business in Canada sometimes than it is with other countries, and it feels that way for doctors. And to get a license, if I wanted to go work in BC, it would take me weeks to figure this out. I'd have to send a whole bunch of paperwork. It's gotten a little bit better over the years. I've kept my Ontario license for that reason, even though I rarely do any work up there since the rugby team folded. To get it back, would take quite a bit of work. So, I've kept it. So, I have a license in 5 provinces, but for most people, it's an effort. There has been some streamlining. Provinces that are reliant on, people coming in and locums have made it a little bit easier. But, it's time for a national licensing program for sure.
I would think it would be advantageous for telehealth to be able to have, because in order to see somebody in Alberta, even over the phone, you would require a license in that province, would you not, or any province?
Yeah, I mean, the rules are a little bit different from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. I mean, some say that, if your patient is from here, but they happen to be in Ontario, you can treat them, like if they're visiting or something.
Yeah.
But you can't treat Ontario patients. And really, what's the difference, right? It's, if you have a license in this country, and you're practicing where you're practicing. We live in a virtual world. What difference does it make where I am? If I'm practicing competently, then that should be enough.
Right. What about licensing of new doctors from foreign countries? Is it something that has been a discussion as well as a way to help ease the healthcare strain and attract family doctors? Are we making progress with that?
We are. However, there are two major problems with that. One is, other countries don't necessarily particularly like us, taking their doctors, but as a temporizing measure, it's been helpful. Some countries do have a surplus of doctors relative to Canada, so I guess that makes it a little more palatable. Problem two with it is, we've brought people here. I said two, but I'll mention three. We've brought people here, but we don't necessarily help acclimatize them to the system, understand the system differences, or we're about cultural language differences. And people have left. They've come here. They can't find a job for their partner or what have you, and it doesn't work for them, and they leave. And we've had some docs recently come from the UK, stay here for a bit and leave. And again, you'd think that would be a good fit. Docs from the UK, presumably they're English speaking, but some system differences. Some of the things I've heard, people weren't happy here. They've left, and good efforts are being made in this world. Not to disparage that at all. The efforts are significant. The other thing that continues to get lost, and why this is tough, is comparing apples to apples. Medical education around the world, unfortunately, is not equal. Can you be educated in any given country and be excellent? Absolutely, you can. But that doesn't mean that you are excellent or at a certain standard, and that's why the licensing authorities have I think tried hard to say, look, okay, well, the U.S. and the U.K., maybe Ireland and some other countries, we feel that those institutions are equal with these procedures. You can work here. If you're outside of those areas, you're going to need some review, some oversight, and it certainly can seem very unfair to people who are often very highly educated, very competent people. Finding that balance between safety and expediency is tough, and I think it's gotten better. But I think people need to understand that part of it.
Right, when it comes to a license, it's a graduated system, is it not? I don't know if that's the right turn of phrase, but it's somebody has to come here and work under somebody else's license for a period of time, and which is that I guess a graduated system. Is that the terminology that would be applicable here? Yeah, I mean that's what happens with some people. I mean, it's not the case, with everybody. I mean, there are some equivalencies where you can apply for a license, and if your materials are reviewed and you're found to have met the educational standards, pass the Canadian basic licensing exam, that sort of thing, then you can practice without oversight. Some people have to go through a period of review or oversight, or maybe have, as you said, restrictions on their license. It varies. And, like I said, I think efforts are being made to move it along. Again, one of the challenges, as we've talked about with medical education, to train more people, you need people to train them. If those people are spending their time doing training or oversight, they're spending less time seeing patients. So, it's not just building another car factory and making more cars. There's a process to it, and it takes time and, to get it right. Okay, 902-405-6000, that's the way to reach us. Wendy sends this email question, says, ask the doctor about sleep ease. Is this something that I can take long term? No idea. I don't know if there's any studies on sleep ease. Is there a concern? This is an email, is it? Yeah. Yeah, not sure. Don't know anything about the long-term impact of sleep ease. Okay, 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us for house calls with Dr. John Gillis. We get the doctor to the top of the hour, get some room for you as well. If you've got a health-related question or concern, give us a call, 902-405-6000. House Calls continues when we come back. All right, House Calls continues to the top of the hour. We have Dr. Gillis with us, 902-405-6000. If you have a health-related question or concern, 902-405-6000. Joyce has given us a call. Hello, Joyce.
Yes, good morning. I'd like to talk to Dr. Gillis about my blood pressure. I always thought I had a normal blood pressure. It's always between 119/74 or 122 or 73, something like that. And a couple of weeks ago, my blood pressure went up to about 135/83 with a heartbeat of 110. So it concerned me because I'd never been up that high before. So I went to see my doctor, and he said my blood pressure and everything was normal. And so I said I was just concerned about it because it's never been like that. So he said, okay, I'll give you something. And he sent in my prescription to the pharmacist. So when I went to get it, it was a beta blocker. And I was just wondering, why would I be on a beta blocker if my blood pressure always seems to be normal? Or if I got the prescription, but I haven't taken it. So I was just wondering if I should be taking it or speak to my doctor again. He didn't tell me it was a beta blocker.
Yeah, I can't tell you not to take something that your doctor asked you to take. That would be irresponsible of me. What you described, though, is that your heart rate was a little bit up and your blood pressure was a little bit up. So that may be why a beta blocker was chosen. Beta blockers are used for two reasons. They're used to control heart rate, but they're also used to control blood pressure. So that may have been the reason for the choice. So, your blood pressure was what I would describe as mildly elevated, nothing of great concern, and one reading. Your heart rate at 110, that is elevated. So, I can't answer you why your doctor chose to go ahead when it sounds to me like you didn't want to, or maybe you did at the time and aren't sure now. So there's nothing wrong with the choice of a beta blocker for blood pressure and heart rate. It's just a matter of determining if that's the right choice for you. And if you're uncertain, I would circle back with your own doctor.
All right. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, Joyce. Take care.
Okay.
All right. When it comes to the parameters surrounding blood pressure, I think 120/80 was always considered kind of the norm or the happy zone. But that's, from what I'm going off memory now, that's kind of moved or changed, has it not, the parameters?
Hasn't changed much. I mean, I think we accept a little bit of an increase with age. Elderly people, the top number sometimes, creeps up a little bit, what we call isolated systolic hypertension. Mm-hmm. But generally the parameters are the same, adjusted a little bit for age and other medical conditions. So there's not a clear-cut answer, but 120/80 is still a strong guideline. We also don't tend to panic about one reading. People sometimes, when they go to the doctor, they're up. When they are stressed, it's up. If they've had 4 cups of coffee like I've had today, it's up. There's different reasons for it. So you wouldn't tend to react to just one reading. You'd want to take multiple and make sure it's accurate.
902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. I saw this story on the CBC website. I'll read just a bit of the headline and then ask you a couple of questions related to it. A Digby woman faces cancer a second time, told to wait to see a dermatologist, could be 9 to 12 months. And we've talked about the shortage of specialists. Dermatology, this is something that, again, that's tough for anybody to have to wait, especially if you've got a cancer scare. What's your advice to people who are waiting on a wait list to see a dermatologist, or any specialist for that matter. And if they're, I mean, patience is obviously key here. But what's your advice, doctor?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, you want to get assessed if you have a concern as soon as you can by somebody. I mean, often that's a primary care person, and it's incumbent on the primary care people to do the best they can to reassure people and to if something looks benign, that's okay to refer them if it is. There can be a tendency just to refer everything, and this is why wait lists can be so long. You can't, diagnose a rash over the phone, for example. You've heard me rant about this a little bit. So if someone's got a rash and you haven't seen it, you shouldn't be sending a referral to dermatology. You should arrange to see them in person. And, if you're not sure or you're concerned, you should deal with it. Generally, if I'm very concerned about something, I'll make a note of that, on the referral. If I think something could be a basal cell, the word cancer scares the crap out of people, but, basal cells are, very slow growing and very rarely cause problems and can be dealt with over time. If you think someone has a melanoma, that's an urgent matter, and, that should be noted, and try and reflect what you're concerned about on a referral. And the other thing for people, we always say if something changes, you should get yourself rechecked. This is a big challenge in the ER for us, not just related to rashes, but, we often, we'll see people come back and, you were here the other day with belly pain in your back. What did they do for you? Nothing. Well, no, it looks like here they did a blood work and a CT scan and told you that if something changed or it got worse, that you should come back. Oh, yeah, they did all that. But when people are stressed, they don't always hear those things. So, we try to be as precise and exact as we can with diagnoses and based on the testing we do. But often a big part of it is, this is what I think it is 99%. But if something changes, you get worse, there's a new presentation, you should get yourself rechecked. And that's key. If you have a rash or something that's of concern, to get yourself rechecked. And that's a very tough balance, because the flip side of it is we see a lot of things that are very minor, that get referred to, specialists and surgeons that don't need to be, with these people. Mm-hmm. And, you want to do I think it comes back to communication and trying to get primary care access for as many people as possible and have primary care people, do their job in person, and as most do. But some are, still relying a little too much on the phone and computers and not actually seeing people. Again, you can't. It's pretty hard to diagnose some stuff if you don't see it.
Yeah, and also in particular, if people are elderly, it's. I would think it would be advantageous to bring somebody along to these appointments, if possible, to a second set of ears and perhaps even take notes or whatever. What's your thoughts on bringing somebody with you to some of these appointments?
Oh, absolutely. And look, the communication goes both ways. I mean, patients sometimes don't hear what's said to them. It may be hard to understand for them, but the flip side is, medical professionals, when they're in a hurry or even when they're not in a hurry, sometimes explain things using language that seems very normal or common to them, but may be Sanskrit to someone who's hearing the information. Or if that person's been there for 8 hours, is exhausted, is sick, they're not processing that information in the same way they might normally. So, there's a big, communications piece here going both ways. And there's some, interesting studies you've seen over the years. You watch a video of, an encounter between a patient and a physician, and, you hear all these things that were said, but then they ask the patient afterwards, what did you hear from that? And they got maybe half of it. Yeah. And then they go ask the, healthcare provider, what feedback do you have from that? And there's often a disconnect there. So, taking that little extra effort in both ways to communicate and be understood is very important.
Okay, Kevin, go ahead quickly, please.
Oh, is that me?
Yeah, that's you. Go ahead, Kevin, quickly if you can.
That's a quick one. Sure, I appreciate that. Very timely. I use virtual healthcare for accessing primary care. I just got off the phone with a virtual healthcare appointment who told me that Nova Scotia Health is no longer accepting lab requisitions from any virtual healthcare provider in the province. I know a lot of Nova Scotians have no access to primary care, so they use virtual care. And I just wanted to see if the doctor had heard anything about that, because this is really big news to me, and it basically renders virtual care about 80% useless, especially people using it to manage chronic illness. So I'm just going to leave that there. I realize you're short of time. I appreciate it. As the old Rick Howe would say, I'm outraged.
Yeah, I've not heard that. I mean, that's something I can definitely look into. And if anyone out there has any information on that, they can maybe feed it back to us, because, we see people, have seen people, do very well with virtual care. I sometimes complain about people not being seen in person because I end up in the emerge. But there's a lot of very good virtual care being done, including, following up on, some routine blood work that, can be followed remotely. Different things are appropriate for that. I've not heard that. If anyone has information on that, please feed it back to us.
Okay, Kev?
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Okay.
I followed up with an MLA and with Nova Scotia Health, so we'll see what comes of it.
Okay, great stuff. Thanks so much. Dr. Gillis, great as always. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you, sir. Talk soon.
Okay, talk next week. That's Dr. John Gillis. That's House Calls. We do that each and every Wednesday from 11 until 12. Now we've got some time for you. What is on your mind? Give us a buzz at 902-405-6000. What is on your mind on this Wednesday? Again, 902-405-6000. Your calls when we come back.
Thanks.
All right, taking your calls. The way to reach us is 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. What would you like to get into today? Did you watch the Liberal leadership debate last night, or there was the French debate the night before? And if so, did any of the four impress you? Did anybody disappoint you? I watched the better part of an hour of it, and that was really all I could take. I found it quite dull, to be honest with you, and this is somebody... I was just looking for more meat in the bone. I don't know what I was expecting. I was just hoping for something a little more inspiring, a little more feisty. I don't know what I was expecting. I will say this, Mark Carney, he does not look like, to me, like somebody who has the game to survive in the political sphere. I don't know. I just... There's something about his presentation, the way that he was going about answering questions, just his body language. He just did not look comfortable to me. And look, I know he's new at the gig at politics, but I mean, this is somebody that's supposedly going to, or according to polling anyway, can resurrect or revive the party, or keep the party alive, I should say. But based on what I saw, and again, no substance when he was talking about he would refer to the economy. We need a vibrant economy, and just there was no meat on the bone there at all for Mark Carney. That's just my take. Perhaps I'm being overly critical. I don't know. I'm just being frank with you in what I thought. He did not impress me. Chrystia Freeland, way too much baggage there. As far as I'm concerned, it's almost irrelevant because she's so attached with 10 years of this previous government, and I just don't know how you can untangle that or disconnect that. Gould, the same thing, I would say. And Frank Baylis, if I were voting in this thing, that's as right now, that's who I would support. For the Liberal leadership, if I were a voting member of the party. I thought that he disseminated information well. He presented himself well. He talked about his private sector experience, why he would be the right guy to stand up to Donald Trump in the United States. He's got political experience. He's been detached from the Liberals and Trudeau for 6 years now, so there's good distance from the Liberals, but he probably won't win based on the fact that I think that this thing is pretty much a fait accompli for all intents and purposes. I think that the Liberals are going to choose Mark Carney. Now, according to polling, if Mark Carney is chosen as the next Liberal leader, more Canadians would vote for his party than Pierre Poilievre's Conservatives. That's according to a new Leger marketing poll. The poll says with Carney as leader, liberal support would rise to 40%, while the Conservatives would be at 38%. And if you don't like that poll, well, Ipsos is saying basically the same thing. For the first time since 2021, Ipsos polling now shows the federal Liberal Party with a slight lead over the Conservatives. So this is the worst nightmare for the Conservatives, who at one point had a commanding 20-point plus lead. But things were a lot different back then, a month ago, way back then, or a month and a half ago, when the target was Justin Trudeau and the carbon tax, and this before the threat of tariffs and the Trump factor. A lot has changed. So what are your thoughts on all of this, folks? Give us a call at 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. You can get into that or whatever else you want to talk about. Again, 902-405-6000. Let's just kick it right off and talk to Tim. Hello, Tim.
Afternoon, Todd. How are you?
I'm well. You?
Good. Listen, the debate, I think you summarized it well, so I won't comment on that. I will comment on, first and foremost, my thoughts certainly go to the child and the family regarding the recent incident in Halifax. Directly, unfortunately, the Premier's comments early on was extremely irresponsible. I'm not sure why he would say just lock somebody up and throw away the key, especially if if the families expressed that the young woman's had mental health problems. But if they've reached out and haven't been able to assess or been able to achieve the mental health they need it, I think we all should take some sort of small responsibility, because at the end of the day, I wish that could have been avoided, but he just acted, in my opinion, ill-informed, and that reflects on the state of the healthcare in the province. Yeah, insensitive for sure, but I can understand in a way why people might have that kind of visceral, immediate reaction when a 6-year-old is stabbed multiple times. I get what you're saying, but I also understand why some people might be inclined to. And look, when you're the Premier, you need to be calculated, and you need to be you're being scrutinized by a lot of people all the time. It's a tough gig for sure. He's got a majority. He's got the keys to the bus. He could certainly improve or enhance mental health or other areas. And unfortunately, when you have somebody that speaks before they maybe have all the facts, that's truly unfortunate. Yeah. Hopefully mental health and others continue to improve in Nova Scotia, and that somewhat an incident like that doesn't happen or reoccur in the future. Yeah, horrifying for sure. Tim, thanks for the call. Appreciate it. Take care, 902-405-6000. Sean wants to talk about the debate. Hello, Sean.
Hey, Todd. Yeah, I want to talk about the debate. I'd have to say, I watched it, and I tried to take a partisan view at it. I know it sounds crazy coming from me, but yeah, honestly, what I took from it was it looked like a Liberal caucus press address. That's what I got from it. They were all agreeing with each other and to great points. It's very clear that Mark Carney is picked to be the one. I mean, nobody fought against him. And I mean, obviously they wouldn't. I mean, Karina Gould and Christy Freeland, they want cabinet positions under Carney's leadership. So, and yeah, I think Frank Baylis did. I never really heard much about him up until the debate. And yeah, he seems like he has a better, at least political side to the thing. I mean, when Mark Carney was asked about healthcare, I mean, his vocabulary might be great with economics and financing, but when it came to healthcare, the only words he knew was doctor, nurse, and family doctor. Mm-hmm. We know this. We need solutions, but he has no. And then what I found really funny is when they were asked about the prices of groceries. And Mark Carney didn't even have an answer, because you know why? He's never been in a grocery store in the last 15 years of his life. And he didn't have a clue what groceries cost. So, yes, I agree. He might have some financial background, but you can't go up there and lie. I mean, he lied to the fact that he said he had nothing to do with the big Brookfield company leaving Canada, which is a total lie. He was actually on the board of directors at the time, and his name was signed to the letter that was sent to shareholders urging them to approve this decision. I mean, it's blatant lies. and people are supposed to go on like why? And I hope Trudeau comes out and says the Liberal Party failed to elect their first female leader, because there's no, I mean, if Rudy Dalla would have been on that stage last night, would have been a whole different ballgame. She did a live stream on TikTok with The View, like while they were doing the debate. She had over 10 million viewers. She had more viewers on her watching her basically commentate the debate, and she had more viewers than CBC had. Like, I don't know, Todd. I don't feel like this is going anywhere. What I feels like to me is this is our Kamala Harris. The media is pushing him out, saying the polls are tight, he's leading in this fight, and then what happened? Trump come in, swept the whole swing states, swept almost every state, and won the popular vote, which no polls predicted that. So are we supposed to believe these polls? I mean, no poll predicted Tim Houston's major majority, super majority. Like, the polls are not right. And you can tell that just by the people that call these shows, like call your show, call Rob's show. Like, there's no enthusiasm behind this guy because he doesn't have any. He's Trudeau with a little broader vocabulary. That's what I took from it, Todd.
Yeah.
I don't know how.
Well, look, like I said, Sean, I was not impressed with him, and even when he talked about you talk about him being this the economy, I didn't hear any substance. There was nothing that Mark Carney did or said last night that impressed me in any way. And like I said, I thought Frank Baylis was head and shoulders the best candidate on that stage last night.
Oh, for sure. And like I said, like Mark Carney's supposed to be the finance guy. I mean, you know why he didn't get into it, Todd? Because he's been the financial advisor for this party for the last 5 years. Yes, so he's got to walk on thin ice there. That's because true. He knows that he's been at the forefront of these policy decisions. So he has to tread lightly. You think that if we ever get to an election, which I don't think we're going to see one for a long time, but could you imagine him debating Pierre Poilievre?
Well, like we were chatting with that earlier. I think Poilievre would do well against him because Poilievre is very seasoned and skilled at his craft for sure.
Yeah, especially in the French debate. I mean, that was a debacle. No wonder they did the English one or the French. Now it doesn't happen. Usually it's the English one first, then the French one. But they put the French one first so they could try to clean Carney up after he fumbled and stumbled in the French one. Now we can get him ready for the one that's going to be viewed by three-quarters of Canada.
Yeah. Well, look, Sean, I would like to know what the numbers look like after the debates, because again, I think that was if that was an opportunity, which it was, for Carney to present himself as being the front runner, man, he's got some work to do as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, I got a boogie. Thanks, Sean.
Thanks, Todd.
Take care. 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back.
Thanks.
All right, taking your calls, 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. Hello, Donna.
Hi, thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
I 100% agree with you, with Frank Baylis. I watched the whole thing, and even the people after, the commentators or whatever they have after. Mm-hmm. And I think Frank Baylis did the best. The only thing about him is I had heard during COVID that Trudeau gave his company millions of dollars in contracts. That's the only thing. But he did good. Carney, none of the others. Now, another thing, this little boy that was stabbed, I said the same thing. Whoever did that should be locked up and throw away the key. Everything nowadays, they've got mental illness, they've got this. There was a guy out west raped a female, and the judge let him off because he was drunk. He wasn't in his right mind when he raped her. Well, I don't know. Mental illness is used far, far, far too much. I know that there are a lot of people that do have mental problems, but in my opinion, I said the same thing as Tim Houston. That woman should be locked up. Anyone that does anything to a child, it's disgusting. Anyway, that's my comments for the day.
Okay, thanks for the call. 902-405-6000. Let's see where we're going next. Let's talk to Fred. Hello, Fred.
Yeah, hi, Todd. Good morning.
Hi.
Love to know where Sean gets all of his information, but I'm afraid to ask. Anyway, I watched the debate last night. It was what I expected it to be. They're not going to give any ammunition to Mr. Poilievre and his crew over there, and I think it was rather amicable because I think these 3 or 4 people are going to be working very close together in the near future. That's my opinion on it. I think everybody's sick and tired of the negative ad campaigns that Poilievre is putting out there. He throws a bunch of words and a bunch of solutions around, but he doesn't say how he's going to pay for it or what he's going to cut or what he's going to do. In his past record, he's voted against $10 a day child care, which helps the poor quite well in being able to go out there and get a job and maintain a job and be able to afford to have a job rather than being on welfare. So that's just one of the things he's voted against. So, yeah, I thought it was exactly the way it was going to be. A little boring and a lot about finance, and that's it.
Well, Fred, you criticized Poilievre for not giving any details about what he's going to do, and then you said that the Liberals aren't going to do that strategically because they don't want to show their hand. So it's a contradiction, is it not? What you're saying?
Not really. I think the first debate, he's going to show exactly what he's going to do. That's my honest feeling about it.
No, but you suggested Pierre Poilievre is not releasing anything with any substance, and you said that, and you criticized him for that. Yet you said that the Liberals you justified in no substance because they don't want to show their hand before an election. So that's you can't have it both ways, can you?
Yeah, you can, because Pierre Poilievre's been out there for 3 years, where Carney's been out there for 6 months. Okay, and if you look at Pierre Poilievre, all right, he says he's going to cut the carbon tax. He says he's going to take stuff off of the HST and GST. And then at the same breath, he turns around and says he's going to increase the military, which I don't disagree with, up to 2%. And he's got all these other great plans, but he doesn't tell you how he's going to pay for it. If you cut your taxes, you can't increase. Somewhere down the line, somebody's got to pay for all these things he says he's going to do.
Well, I thought he said that he was going to cut foreign aid was going to be one of the ways that he's going to pay for it. Wasn't that not it? Was that not one of the...
That was one of the things, and that's really, do you want him to cut foreign aid? Let's think about this. Look what happened when the U.S. cut foreign aid out of South Africa. They kicked all the American companies out of there. Because if you're no longer going to help out those who don't have, guess what? You don't reap the benefits of the other stuff.
Okay, Fred, thanks for the call. Appreciate it. Yeah. Take care. 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. Let's talk to Jeremy. Hello, Jeremy.
How you doing, Todd?
Well, you?
Good, thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to come back to the question that actually appeared yesterday. I didn't have a chance to call in, but it was, basically parsing whether or not Premier Houston did what he did on his reversal for the legislation related to the Auditor General. Did he do it because he heard the people and decided, he's going to listen to the people, or did he do it maybe because it was, there was such a public outcry that he knows it would have a negative political consequence? And I think, regardless, his motive was not because he heard the people. Yeah, he heard the people, but I think very much he heard the people and did the right thing because he knew he had no other choice at that stage because of the public outcry. And I think if you look at some other decisions he's made recently, where, for instance, the 2 women who had to take the province to court to get their out-of-province medical care, he wasn't, budging on that until they all of a sudden got a judicial review against the province, right? So I think when you start to consider these things as a whole, it's not that Tim Houston is doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do. Tim Houston is doing the right thing because it's the politically advantageous thing for him to do in the moment, right?
Yeah, Jeremy, you could say that about just virtually every politician, though, could you not?
Yeah, you could, but I think it's still important to, I guess, look at it and call it what it really is, right? I mean, he has this supermajority. He could be doing things that would open up access to public information and give more transparency to government. Instead, he's choosing to do or trying to do more to close that down,
That's
right?
true.
That, to me, that speaks volumes, really. You have a supermajority. You could pretty well pass any piece of legislation you want to right now. And so for him to go after the Auditor General and the Privacy Commissioner in the same week, and I would add that I think it was this party, after they got elected, they said that they would give the FOIPOP Commissioner the power to issue orders.
Yeah.
That was, I think, 3 years ago, right? So, you can say all you want. This is what we're going to do. We're for more transparency and accountability in government. But when your actions don't line up with your words, and the public has to fight you tooth and nail for things that they're deserving of, and the branches of government or a legislative member of the House, like the Auditor General, has to publicly come out and call you out and say, I can't do my job if you do this. I think your actions will always speak louder than your words. I think it's disingenuous.
So for you, the trust has been broken, Jeremy, obviously.
Yeah, I think it has. I mean, if it was one incident, it'd be different. And I will, say in part, I do agree with you that, okay, you know what? He did the right thing. Yeah, that's good. But I think he needs to go a step further and not just stop what he was going to do that would have, curtailed our ability to understand where our money is going. But I think he needs to follow through on the promise, the campaign promise that was made, which was give order-making power to the Freedom of Information Commissioner. So it's not just recommendations, because recommendations, we all know, get followed zero amount of the time, right? They just don't.
Yeah.
They sit on a shelf forever until some other similar situation comes up 2 years later, and somebody says, well, geez, you guys said you were going to do something about this 2 years ago, but nobody does, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I think, I'd say the trust has been broken at this stage. Who knows? I guess maybe he'll surprise me one of these days, but I don't think we should have to fight for stuff that, in most democracies, people get.
Right. Okay, Jeremy, thanks for the call, pal.
Cheers, buddy.
Take care. 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back.
Thanks.
All right, continuing with your calls, 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. Look, I look for leadership, and part of leadership is inspiration and inspiring people. That's what real leadership is about when it comes to, in particular, at this level. And again, I did not get that vibe at all last night watching this debate. In particular from Mark Carney, who is the presumed front runner here. I think it's safe to say that he's going to win this thing. But anyway, that's just my take. What's yours? What are your thoughts? Perhaps you think I'm dead wrong, and that's fine. Let's find out what your thoughts are. 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. Hello, Chris.
Good morning, Todd.
Hi.
I don't know what I can add to what basically you've said, because I agree with it 100%, and what Sean said as well. I mean, it was pretty obvious. I watched every second of that debate, and I watched the panel of discussion, the discussion panel they had on afterwards as well. And they too, I guess, pretty much admitted what you've already said about how lackluster it was. I was quite impressed, actually, with someone I know really nothing about, and that's Frank Baylis. I'll give him credit for one thing. It was abundantly clear to me that the other three were not going to mention the words oil and gas. However, he did, and he mentioned pipelines. I thought he was pretty upfront with what his thoughts were. It didn't appear as though he was trying to hide anything whatsoever. Didn't try and paint everything with a rosy brush. He admitted that he didn't know when he'd be able to balance a budget. But as far as balancing the budget, Carney came up with a new one. I've never heard it described this way before, that we had actually two budgets, one being an operational budget, and that's the one that he said he'd be able to balance. Did you make note of that?
Yeah,
yourself?
he said that a week or so ago, I think, when he first
floated
that trial balloon.
Yeah, and he said it again. I mean, that to me is just a smoke and mirrors thing.
Yeah.
I'm actually a little bit surprised that Jim Hoskins hasn't called in to tell us all how good Mark Carney did. I hope you're out there, Jim. Give us a call and give us your take on it. Also, Jim, if you call, please, can you explain to Todd's audience why you continuously call it the Trump and Poilievre ticket? I don't get it. I don't see it that way. I'm a Poilievre supporter. I was born into a strong liberal, generational liberal family, but I'm a Poilievre supporter. Do I like Trump? Hell no. Not in the least. But anyway, you had a caller on earlier saying about Poilievre not saying how he's going to come up with the money for his expenditures and so on. Well, have we ever heard in the last 8, 9, 10 years from the Trudeau government any concrete measures that they were going to take or what they were going to do to pay for theirs other than going in debt? I don't remember hearing anything other than, well, they're going in debt and we've overshot our budget by another $20 billion or what have you.
Well, they call it investing.
Oh God, investing.
Yeah.
Well, Todd, if you invested or I invested or anyone in the country invested the way they do, we'd all be bankrupt long ago. And I guess technically the government is bankrupt.
Yeah.
Carney's trying, in my opinion, to repackage a lot of Trudeau's stuff and just put a different label on it. It's going to be the same old thing, and in my opinion, it'll be Trudeau 2.0 or worse. I just don't trust Carney. To me, he's shifty and lackluster, certainly in that debate last night. It was horrible. I expected a lot more than that. I actually think, and I don't like Chrystia Freeland, but I actually think she did better than him. He was number 4 on the totem pole as far as I'm concerned. And these reciprocating tariffs that they're all talking about, I took basic economics at university as part of my commerce course, so I'm no economist, don't pretend to be, but the way Mark Carney is explaining it, he's either stupid and incompetent or he's a liar, one or the other. Shifting the carbon tax upstream to businesses, and we're not going to end up paying for it as consumers. I mean, come on, Todd, give me a break. What do you think?
Well, we had cap and trade here in this province for years before the change of government, and I never heard one person mention it or complain about it, including businesses or anybody. So it's I think it's less of a lightning rod than you go to the gas pump and you pay 14 cents a liter or 15 cents or 18 or 20 or whatever it was projected to go up to. I think it's a lot different than that when it comes to the political sell. So that's just my take on it. I agree that somebody's going to pay, and it's probably not probably, yes, big businesses will pass that on to consumers in some way, but as a political wedge issue, I don't think it's got nearly the traction either way than the current carbon tax.
No, it's absolutely. Well, it's government loves, as we all know, government loves to hide a tax because the better they hide it, the less of us are ever going to find out about it and be able to complain about it. But the reciprocal tariffs that they're all talking about, they're using as an argument with Trump and his people that, yeah, you're putting tariffs on Canadian goods and it's going to be tough for Canada, but it's going to hurt your consumers and your businesses in the States as well. But yet what are these guys, the Liberals, planning? Reciprocal tariffs on goods coming in from the United States. If Trump's tariffs are going to hurt the States, Canada's tariffs are going to hurt Canada, are they not?
Yeah.
The consumers in the same way.
Yeah.
How can these people, especially Carney, who claims to be a great economist and so smart when it comes to money and taxation and all these things, how can he float anything like that and defend it? I mean,
Chris, is because, look, people want to see a government taking action and doing something to defend Canadian rights and Canadian sovereignty.
Todd, that's the wrong action. That's a totally wrong action.
The alternative, Chris, then is do nothing, right?
Okay, let's assume Trump goes ahead with the tariffs, and we as a country do not institute reciprocal tariffs against him.
Right.
We can still not buy U.S. because a lot of people, we don't have tariffs right now, and a lot of people are not buying U.S. We can continue to expand upon that. They can take down the provincial barriers. They can still do that.
Yeah.
There's lots of things that they can do. They can support Canadian businesses and consumers better than they have been supported. And anything we buy and have to buy, and there's lots of things that we have to buy that come in from the States, tariff or not, we have to buy them. So at least if we don't have our tariffs against it, those things that we have to buy, we at least will be getting at the same basic price as what we're paying now.
Okay, got a boogie. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate the call.
Todd, thanks a lot, man.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. David, hello.
Good day, Todd. How are you?
I'm well, you?
Good. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
I just want to bring it to everyone's attention here. It seems like a lot of political talk, and they get all upset, including your last couple callers, that I don't know if they live in HRM or not, and I mentioned it before, how violent this city is. Just watching the news and listening to the news over the last period of time, the stabbing of the 6-year-old, a hammer beating on a bus, a man found shot in Fairview on the sidewalk, and you can go on and on. And I think it's time that maybe your show, your producer, I don't know who you get on the show, if it's the chief of police, if it's a couple counselors on the police board, I really don't know. But, you know, we hear $650,000 vehicle.
Yeah.
We hear extra police officers for duty, and I understand that, Todd. But I think it's time, listening to your show and how people get upset and how much political talk and how they're upset about political. Shouldn't it be upset what's going on in our community and in our city?
Yeah. Well, David, it's interesting because when we had the counselors here Monday, I had Sean Cleary, who's a veteran counselor, and I asked him about this violence in the city, and he says that based on the empirical data, the evidence, that Halifax is less violent than it was years ago. I don't know, David. Look, I hear what you're saying. I live in Spryfield, and I heard about that bus incident. I read about it, obviously, and that's where it took part. And the stabbing of the 6-year-old, and there's always gas stations being held up and armed robberies, and it appears to me anecdotally, David, that crime and violent crime is getting out of control. But David, to your point, you're right. We should have somebody on from the police commission or the police chief. We actually should reach out, and will reach out to the chief, because we haven't had the chief on since I took the job over full time. So we're going to do that, because you're right. These are questions that should be addressed and should be answered, and we should know empirical data, because it appears to me that I'm with you. Things are getting scary out there, quite honestly.
Yes. Thank you very much. And I know your show is a great first step and a great voice for us and people in the community to come out and say if we're outraged or what our concerns are. I don't think we're addressing this concern. You know, if you look at it, maybe if you get a show together and you look at, and for them to get on there and say, oh, data shows what? Well, you know, 2 years ago, there was an 8-year-old boy shot on Windmill Road. It's never been, there's nothing about that. And you could go on, Todd, the shooting in Africville, the police that tased a man on the weekend and he died. You know, that's another mental illness case that the police aren't, that's not the job of the police. You know what I mean? And we're building a community, and look how great we are, and look at the big buildings we have. Look at all the cranes we have and the people coming in. But you know something? Excuse my expression here. It's getting to be a shit show as far as us looking after each other here, and as far as us knowing that we're safe. Because, Todd, I don't think we're safe. It doesn't matter if you live in Spryfield, North End, Dartmouth, Eastern Passage, Clayton Park. Are you really safe? Do we feel safe like we did before? You know, we listen to the counselors on the hot seat there. That's the only time that we can hear them. It's the only time they come on your show, unless they come on the show to defend themselves because somebody said something about them. So come on the show and tell us what you're doing for us. Like, you know, not to repeat here, but you look at a $650,000 vehicle that you need in case something escalates, but yet a man got tased and died by something that you shouldn't be looking after.
Okay, David, appreciate the call. Get a boogie. Thanks for the call, pal. Take care. 902-405-6000. By the way, the Mayor Fillmore will be on the show on Friday at 10:15, might either in studio or via phone, so I will ask him some of these questions. 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back. All right, taking your calls, 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. Quick email from Rob, then back to the phones. Rob says, Mark Carney is gaining popularity partly because he's perceived to be moving the Liberals to the center where most Canadians feel comfortable. Well, okay, that's the narrative that's happening, but it needs to be mentioned and can't be forgotten. And it's important that we all realize and understand that Carney's been at the helm to a degree when it comes to economic policy for since 2000. He's been Trudeau's advisor. And we believe the plan was he was going to be his finance minister. But Chrystia Freeland put the kibosh on that plan. Anyway, 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. Alexander, hello.
Good afternoon, Todd.
Hi there.
Just a quick comment. You had a gentleman on from the steel industry this morning.
I did, yeah.
And I had no idea that the truckloads of I-beams and steel I see going into the city, the new buildings, all came from America. Is that what he said?
Well, he said a lot of it does. Not all of it, but certainly a lot of it does come from the United States, yes.
Yeah, no, it's to me, it's similar as when COVID hit and we all needed emergency gowns and surgical masks, and our country doesn't make them anymore. So we were at the mercy of others, and prices sort of skyrocketed. So to me, it's very similar, and I'm hoping that down the road, if there is a federal election, that one of the parties will make it a point to bring that up, that we have to become a little more independent, or a lot more independent, and start making our own things again.
Yeah, the only challenge, or one of the big challenges, is that it's difficult to turn around an industry like that. You need expertise, you need skill set, you need investment. And it's not, doesn't happen overnight. And this is one of the big challenges as to how we can fix all of this stuff, right?
Well, that's absolutely true. But to me, see, I'm old enough to remember when you could buy I-beams. There used to be a little steel mill up towards New Glasgow. You could buy them 25 years ago or so, locally made. Yeah. So I don't know when we had this switch that all of a sudden all this heavy steel was coming from the States, but certainly the expertise must be in the country somewhere. And to me, a steel mill in Ontario should be able to start making a couple adjustments and getting some machines out of mothballs and start making some I-beams and doing well in the market for them.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Alex. Appreciate the call.
Thank you.
All right. Take care. 902-405-6000. Sharon, hello.
Hi. How are you, Todd?
I'm well. You?
You know what? I know everybody listens to your show. No offense, just general public. I don't think the right people are listening. I read the letter from the mother of the girl that did the stabbing. Mm-hmm. I know what our mental health system is like. I have had a family member in there. The girl was in a psychotic episode. Not that made it right. You can call the emergency mobile clinic and they'll come. And unless you say you're going to kill yourself or somebody else, they suggest you get, some mental health counseling. Do you know how old the Dartmouth Hospital is?
No idea.
Google it. It will shock you. So you have the Mayflower unit over there, and then we have Abbey Lane. A short-term stay, they try to get you stable, and you're on your way. The long-term, there's very few beds. And this woman would not allow the girl to be home because she was afraid that she would attack or kill the other sister. She has tried everything. We don't have enough doctors. The ones that treat people with mental health and the nurses are superb. But it's not just this government. He has the nerve to say he feels bad about the young boy. It's governments in the last 20 years. How much of our dollar goes towards mental health?
Well,
we need people that are on a mobile unit to come in and talk on your show and say what they can and can't do.
Mm-hmm.
We need people that work in that environment to come in and tell you how bad it really is. And unless you've got somebody that's in this system, you have no idea how hard it is.
Yeah, I don't disagree with what you're saying, Sharon. But the one of the main reasons why it doesn't happen is because it's very difficult to make happen. It's extremely expensive. You have to divert money and funds from other things in order to pay for mental health resources. You need to get the human resources, the people with the expertise working. They're hard to find. The recruitment, retention, all of that's all very tough. I'm not making excuses for anybody, Sharon. I'm just that these are the reasons why it is so difficult to deal with.
Right, and I get these probably cannot pick somebody up and take them in. I do believe, you can check, but I do believe now if you're taken in, the doctor has the right to commit. And you see on Facebook, Todd, how many people have gone missing, and the police are looking for them because they're a danger to themselves or someone else. That little boy is alive.
Yeah.
What's it going to take for the next person to be killed by this person or some people that have mental illness? There's just not the resources out there for them. Yeah. And I'm sorry, somebody has got to do something because it's just going to continue. It's just going to continue. And, someone's going to die, and they don't have to. They have to have more places to put these people. I know out west, I have a relative that's a manic depressive. Mm-hmm. Or he's paranoid schizophrenic. Mm-hmm. He does not get his check until he goes in every month. He picks up his medication and goes in and has a needle. And that's the way it should be. It should be mandatory. You take people that have, drug addictions, and they go in and they get their methadone, from the pharmacist, mm-hmm. To try to get off of it. Well, it should be the same thing. If you have mental illness, and there's social workers out there, you go in and you show up and you get that needle, or you take those pills, or else, right? I don't know the answer, but I know, the government, and not just Houston, but governments before. It would be interesting for Mr. Houston to tell us how much money out of $1 is spent on mental health. That's what I want to know.
Yeah. Okay, Sharon, appreciate the call. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you so much.
All right, take care. Yeah, look, it's tough, folks, because again, and nobody would argue that the need is great. And in a perfect world, we would have all the resources that you would need, but you start paying and ramping up one area of healthcare, it's got to come from somewhere. And the pool of money is only so much. And it's the need is immense. But I get why people are passionate about all of this. I really, truly do. And I get people's points of view. Thanks for listening, everybody. We appreciate it very much. We will open the phone lines again tomorrow between 11 and 12. I'd like to thank Vanessa Van Den Ness as well on the other side of the glass. The control board's doing a fine job as always. We're back tomorrow, 10 o'clock. See you then.